Good news for Florida State. That's why we're here talking right now. He's Corey Clark. I'm Tom Lang. We represent Warchant.com and Warchant TV. And boom, there it is. Michigan State wide receiver Keon Coleman is going to transfer to Florida State. Florida State gets a bona fide weapon to add to an offense that already had a bunch of them. Corey, what do you think about this news?
Yeah, man. When you would have started the spring, I would have said, wide receiver it's a half a want. It's definitely not a need, and it's not really a want. But then what happened this spring happened. Micah left. Darian Williamson didn't show a whole lot. Portier had a nice spring, but you had real question marks about who's going to be opposite Johnny Wilson, and now you don't. Now you can literally claim you have the best 1-2 wide receiver combination in the country to go along with maybe the best running back room in the country, at least top 10ish offensive line, one of the best tight ends in the country. I mean, on and on you go. You also have Winston Wright, who hasn't played in 2 years, but was one of the best slot wide receivers in the transfer market 2 years ago. So when you look at it, it was a want and not a need. But now that you have Keon Coleman on board, it feels like, man, that was an enormous get. This is an enormous get if you're going to accomplish some great things in 2023.
Well, Corey, a lot of times football over the course of a long season is about attrition, and we saw that with Florida State last
Yeah.
year. Jordan Travis had to miss a little bit of a spell, but the offensive line got banged up, defensive interior. Wide receiver was the one position on offense. If you put Jordan Travis away, because anybody loses their star quarterback, it's bad news. But at running back, at offensive line for the first time in forever, at tight end, Florida State has answers if a guy's not available on a given week. But now Keon Coleman builds that kind of depth at wide receiver where if you had to go with only Coleman or only Johnny for a week, that's okay. But if Johnny went down and Coleman did not come to Tallahassee, I mean, think about it. If the LSU game was Johnny Wilson list, it's not like FSU's offense doesn't have weapons, but it changes the discussion. Now you have a little bit of insurance here with Keon Coleman, and insurance that caught nearly 800 yards worth of passes for a Michigan State team that was no good in the Big Ten last year.
Yeah, correct. And he didn't have maybe the best quarterback either. Didn't have a great passing offense. He certainly didn't have anybody beside. He didn't have a Jordan Travis or a Johnny Wilson or a Trey Benson on his football team. So, man, you just look at, okay, you knew the offense. The offense was one of the top 10 in the country last year. And it should, I mean, Tom, you have added Jaheim Bell and Keon Coleman to what was already going to be a prolific offense. You are now looking at what could be efficiency wise, the best offense in America. Like there are weapons everywhere. And Jaheim Bell is a difference maker. He is a season changer. And he now might not even be the biggest guy you brought in skill wise on the offense because that's how good Keon Coleman is. Keon Coleman is a legitimate number one type wide receiver. Now you've already got number 14. You've got a 6'7" freak on one side. But Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson all of a sudden gives Jordan Travis two NFL wide receivers, two maybe high pick NFL wide receivers to go along with the running game of Jaheim Bell and Marqueston Douglas and Morlock and all those other guys at tight end. Not to mention, I hate that phrase, by the way, because I'm about to mention them. Portier, Winston Wright, Ja'Kai Douglas. These are guys that can make plays. I mean, Winston Wright almost feels like another transfer portal ad. I know he was last year, but he feels like a free agent addition to this team because he didn't do anything for you last year, literally. So, man, I think it almost – I wasn't sure. Maybe I just couldn't come to grips with this actually happening. But I wasn't sure what I would feel if I would feel any different about the season and the expectations and the probabilities of winning championships if Keon Coleman committed or not. And now I got to say I do. I feel like you go into every game with an offense that a defense knows it cannot stop. It might slow it down somehow, but you have an offense that could steamroll almost everybody on the schedule.
Well, yeah, and Johnny Wilson, of course, is a mismatch with his height, and he's more athletic than the 6'7" frame would suggest. He can really move. But this is not a small target either. It's 6'4", 210 pounds, and Keon Coleman. And Corey, the best part is when you're throwing the football, or you've got it in Jordan's hands for a read option or whatever it is, an RPO, somebody's in single coverage. Somebody is left one-on-one, and that somebody could be some of the receivers that you've listed, the tight ends. Hell, freshman Dre Jacobs could be that guy that's left in singles. I mean, yeah, you're correct. If turnovers aren't an issue in a given game, Florida State should fly by the low 30s in terms of point production every single game. And then it just becomes about how good is the defense on the other side. Can the defense hold down an offense for 3 empty possessions in a half, or, field goals only in 2 out of 3 possessions, something along those lines? Because if that's the case, the math shifts so heavily to Florida State's favor that you'll see other teams play desperate and
Yeah.
take chances that they shouldn't, because they know the consistency of the offense on the other sideline is going to be at the highest level. It just changes how you have to game plan game to game if you're Florida State's opponents.
I also think it might fundamentally change how Florida State game plans itself on offense, because when you have an offense that's this dynamic, you need extra possessions.
Yep.
It does not do you any good. I mean, it does. You always want a really good offense. But if you're only going to have 9 possessions in a game, that's self-defeating. You might need to speed it up a little bit, man, to get 11 or 12 possessions in a game, because if this offense, you have to think, if they stay healthy, if they have the ball 12 times in a game, that's 5 or 6 touchdowns, probably.
Yeah.
At least 5, say 35 points. They've got to figure out a way to not, because they had a few games last year where it felt like they only had 3 possessions and a half. And I know they run the ball. I know they run clock. They're not a slow team. They're not Jimbo snail slow, but they're also not one of the fastest teams in the country. They might want to pick it up and do a little more hurry up, don't you think? I mean, I think this changes kind of the calculus of how fast this offense should go. That's how impactful I think Keon Coleman is.
I think, judging by the twinkle in Mike Norvell's eye out at Amelia Island, he was asked about this. I think it was Aslan who asked the question, because we had a presence there at warchant.com. That's what the hell we do. We're everywhere.
Yeah, everywhere.
About the clock running after first downs, outside of 2 minutes in each half. The clock will run now in college football. That's a thing. And you wonder, Corey, if that makes it even more of a priority to go hurry up. Because before there was whatever, it was kind of an imperfect science between 3 seconds or 10 seconds after
Right.
a first down's achieved. It kind of depended on the clock operator, really, until the game got tight and late. Now, if it has to run, I think there has to be a conscious decision to go faster rather than let's see how it plays out and then we'll play it by ear. I think you're right. I would be expecting, now that Coleman's in the fold, a lot more of those hurry-up drills. They run them in practice.
Yeah.
They might run them a little bit more this fall.
And they do it sometimes in a game. You'll see them when they hit a big play in the middle of the field. They'll run up and snap it quick. They do that. I just think they'll be maybe doing a little bit more. And I was going to ask you, obviously Keon Coleman came on the scene. His name was on the scene when he entered the portal, and it was clear that both sides had interest. About the same time that Jalen Key did at safety.
Yep.
Not to bring up bad news, but Jalen Key chose Alabama, and we were having a discussion on Wake Up Warchant about who's the bigger get. And again, I think this might be, maybe it's recency bias, maybe it's sour grapes about the safety, but I think now that it's happened, now that he's in the fold, Keon Coleman is a bigger deal, even though you needed more safety help. I think Keon Coleman is a bigger deal than Jalen Key, and I think Keon Coleman is probably going to add more points to your offense's total number this year than Jalen Key would have taken away if he was on the defense. You know what I mean? If you do that math, I think Keon Coleman is a bigger addition, because now this offense goes from possibly great, or it was going to be good to great, very, very good, to maybe unstoppable. And again, all offenses are stoppable, but they are going to be so loaded if they stay healthy that I think this is a bigger deal. I think this is a bigger get.
Yeah, number one, like I said before, the insurance policy. If you're missing Johnny for a stretch in a game, it's just nice to have a bona fide player like this with the experience to go along with the talent at the ready. He makes everybody better, though. You're correct. He makes everybody on offense better because they're going to be in more favorable matchups. Whenever the ball comes their way, with Keon Coleman now in the fold, chances are it's more favorable than it was going to be beforehand, where they could leave a guy in isolation on Florida State's number 2. And that's not a knock on Kentron Portier, because I thought he had a really good finish to camp, and I think he could have blossomed into a number 2 receiver. But now you've got a 1A or a 1B in Keon Coleman, and I think that's where it changes. I would agree with you. They still need to go and address safety, because that's what people do on the boards and in the chats and the comment section is, okay, wonderful, what's next? Well, Florida State's only got a couple of spots left to be under the 85 or at the 85 number. And I would think, Corey, that safety, even though Ashlyn Barker committed from JUCO this year, that's a 4-year player. You've talked about it. It's a 4-year player. It's almost like adding to your high school signing class. They still need to address that issue at safety, but they can do so with the comfort of knowing that Keon Coleman's part of the fold now, right?
Because they got this guy. Like this guy is a ready-made player. He's proven it at the highest level. And going back to Portier, um, we were hoping maybe, and he still might. He probably will if he plays like he did this spring. We want Portier to develop into something good. Well,
Yep.
he could develop into a Keon Coleman. Well, you just got Keon Coleman. So you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
so you already got what you were hoping Portier might develop into. You already have a ready-made version of that on the other side. And Portier, look, there might be some hurt feelings, as Jeff Cameron likes to say. We'll see how the other wide receivers react to news like this. But either way, that position got much, much better. And you're right. I do agree with safety. I was under the impression that if you gave me my pick
Mm-hmm.
a week ago, I would have said, yeah, take. And again, it might be just sour grapes. I would have been like, yeah, take the safety. But the way we laid out, and you laid out, if Johnny Wilson gets hurt, and there's so many other question marks outside of him. Well,
Yeah.
now you literally have the best. You went from having a guy that could possibly start for you at safety. That's what you were hoping to get. Maybe start for you, maybe not. To maybe now having the best 1-2 wide receiver combination in the country.
Yep.
So that's a good trade-off. And I'm not saying you couldn't have gotten both. I'm just saying when I look at how the transfer portal is laid out, this is even a bigger get than I was thinking a week ago.
Yeah, I agree. Now that it's pulled off, maybe it's just because
Yeah.
I'm the opposite of you. It's not sour grapes. It's all right. Now that you've done it, great job. Great job.
Mm-hmm.
This is what we wanted all along. But if I'm one of those other receivers in the rotation, I'm frothing at the mouth at the matchups I'm going to get with this
Yeah.
guy in the fold now. I have a chance. Okay, maybe I lose 10 or 12 catches for the year. Maybe I lose 20. But the catches I do get might go for the house call because,
Yeah.
again, I'm in one-on-one against their third best corner, or I'm against the safety that I know I'm going to smoke. So Vandravius Jacobs just got more dangerous by this move, and that's a guy who could potentially be a game breaker. And you're right to note guys like Ja'Kai Douglas. This makes him all the more formidable.
Winston Wright, if he's fully healthy. And again, I think what's cool about the way this depth chart is set up now is you have some young guys. You have Destin Hill, who's up now on campus. He actually made it. He's here. You have Vandravius Jacobs, Hakeem Williams. These guys are future players, probably. Maybe Vandravius gets into the fold this year, but they're more for the future. Well, now look who they get to learn from.
Yeah.
Look who they get to rep with every day. Look who they get to go to meetings every day. Look who they get to watch on film every day and study. Two NFL guys. Winston Wright has more catches than both of them in his career. I mean, you've got real experience to go along with NFL type talent. And below them is, like you said, younger guys frothing at the mouth to get out on the field. Now, we all know that college football isn't what it was even 4 years ago. So there's no guarantee any of those guys will stick around to develop for your program. But if they do, what a great year this will be for them just to watch it up close and personal. And it's a really big get. It's an enormous get. It caps off. Well, I guess we think they might maybe get one more safety, but it caps off offensively what has been a very, very good transfer portal season. When you talk about the offensive linemen, the tight ends, and now this guy.
Last thing I'll ask you here, because you love to put it in historical perspective, especially with your knowledge of Florida State in the modern era of college football. Relate this offense preseason wise. They got to do it. They got to earn it. But in terms of explosiveness compared to some of the greats now in Florida State history, this has a chance to be right up there at the end of the season. Production in this game is always skewed. Like, it's skewed modern. You're going to produce more points and yards. But just in terms of where the hell do I focus on stopping? Yeah. This has to be along the best of the 90s, the best of, like, the Jameis era. What do you think, Corey, in terms of this offense against the historically great FSU offense?
Yeah, it's up there, and obviously we will couch and qualify this by saying I'm saying all this in the middle of May.
Yep.
So we'll see what I'm saying in the middle of November. Yeah. But as it looks on paper, you have an All-American caliber quarterback who does stuff with his legs that nobody at this school's ever done. You've got an All-American caliber running back. You've got 2 NFL draft picks, I think, at wide receiver. You've got an NFL draft pick at tight end to go along with the best offensive line you've had in a decade. So I think all of that said, I think you're looking at one of, I don't know, man, 93, 13, 99. There have been some incredible offenses at Florida State. This will be, I think, efficiency-wise, right up there with all of them except 13. I just think 13 is probably unsurpassable, if that's a word. But other than that, it can bump its head again. It can compete with all the other um, offenses that have ever come through this school, man. And again, they're back in the '90s with Rick, they would sometimes have 15 or 16 or 17 possessions. So those skewed a little bit more towards huge scoring. But I'm just saying, man for man, talent for talent. The big play, like you said, for big play. Also, the ability to not just hit big plays. They can go on 9-play drives. They can go on 11-play drives. They can beat you running the ball with their bevy of running backs or their quarterback. And they also have, this freak of a tight end. And now this kid from Michigan State. I think you're looking at one of the most talented offenses, certainly the most talented offense they've had in a decade, and probably, I don't know, man, the second most talented offense they've had in 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's all out there for them now. They have an offense that rivals, that almost doesn't have a rival in the country.
So here's your pop culture reference on the way out. It's like Walter White and Skyler staring at the pile of money that they have in a storage facility. That's what Mike Norvell and Alex Atkins are doing right now, thinking about what this offense could be in 2023. We'll document it from May, where we are now, all the way through the end of the season. Jump on board with us. Hit the like button underneath this video. This is easy to like, this kind of news.
Could be a fun season, everyone. Should be a really fun season.
Subscribe to Warchant TV absolutely free. Head over to the website for more coverage, warchant.com, for the best coverage in the business. He's Corey. I'm Tom. Today is a good day if you're an Nole. We'll talk to you next time on Warchant TV.